This video is going to show you how to graph a trig function with an a and a b value. The b value is going to change the interval from being a full cycle in 0 to 2 pi to a full cycle in something different. Okay, so the b term in this case is the 4, and we're going to take this 4 and we're going to get the period. So right here is me finding the period. That would be 2 pi over b, so it's 2 pi over 4, which ends up being 2 pi. That value is where a full cycle finishes. So a full sine curve is going to go till pi over 2, and then there's going to be another one and another one and another one. So this b tells me that in 2 pi, I'm going to have 4 full cycles of sine. So this graph is going to be scrunched together. All right, so I'm going to find the other intervals. So what I want to do is I'm going to take the period and I'm going to divide it by 4, which is the same as multiplying by 1/4. So for period 1, I'm going to do, so for period 1, I'm going to do 1/4 times pi over 2, which is pi over 8. All right, so that is my first interval. So that first little slat, right here, so right here, that line right there, that's going to be pi over 8. I'm not going to write it in because it makes up a ton of space. But right there is pi over 8, so that's going to be where my first stop is. Okay, then I'm going to take this value that I just found, this pi over 8, I'm going to take that and I'm just going to multiply it by 2 because every interval is going to go up by pi over 8. So my second stop, I'm going to do pi over 8 times 2, which is going to give me pi over 4. Okay, so this right here is going to be pi over 4. And that makes sense because it's right in the middle of pi over 2 and 0. Okay, so when I do the next slot, I'm going to take pi over 8 again, but I'm going to multiply it by 3 because that's the third interval. So each jump is going to go up by pi over 8, so therefore this would then be times 3, so 3 pi over 8. Okay, and then my fourth spot is going to be the full period. So that would technically be pi over 8 times 4, which is pi over 2, which we already knew was going to happen, but that's where that comes in. All right, so all my little stops, so this is pi over 8 right here. Okay, this is pi over 4, this is 3 pi over 8, and then bam, there's pi over 2, and then I would keep going with the cycle. So I split everything in fourths. To figure out where my fourths are, I knew my system stopped at pi over 2. I know a full cycle is in pi over 2, so I went halfway between, and I made this, because I knew that would be one of the stops, and then I went halfway between the 0 and that slot and put a line, and I went halfway between and made another one here. So I went half, and then I halved again to get my slots. All right, now I'm going to draw the graph, and I'm just going to use the trig function for sine. Okay, so sine tells me to start at 0, 0, because there's no plus value at the end. So I'm going to start at 0, 0, and then it tells me to go up and down a. So a is 2, so I'm going up and down with that one. So I'm going to go up and down 2 from there for my first little slot. So I'm going to go up 2, and then I'm going to go down 2. I'm going to go down 2 again. This one's going to kind of be in between. And then I'm going to go back up. And I'm going to do that whole thing over again. So I'm going to go up 2, down 2, down 2, up 2. And then I would keep going. I can keep going. I'm not going to do that right this second. So I'm going to connect my dots now as closely as I can. And that whole cycle would keep going. I could show that. It's much easier to do if you had pen and paper. So I showed you 2 cycles of it. This would be 4 full cycles to get the 2 pi. What I want you to show me is the little slots where the fourths are. I need to clearly see. I should clearly see that you have 1 full cycle that stopped here, and then you went to pi, and that's another full period. So you had another full cycle, and then you would have another cycle to here, and then you would have another cycle to here. Okay? To put my slashes in, I would be thinking from here to here, I'd go halfway, and then I'd go halfway again. And same thing, I go halfway, and then halfway again. And I could do my up, down again to finish that. Okay, so that is how you would graph that. This is my interval work. I couldn't quite fit it into the chart, but that would be what you did on the paper with the chart. Okay, so I'd want to see if I have the intervals on the side, you don't have to write the intervals on the chart. Okay, so that is what you do with a sine one. The next thing I'll do is a cosine one. Okay, this part I'm going to show you how to graph a cosine function with an a value and a b. The b value is the 1/2. The b value will tell you how long it will take to have a full cycle. Okay, so the b in this case is 1/2. So what that means is that in 2 pi, I'll have half a cycle. All right, so that means that I'm not going to see a full graph in 2 pi. I'm only going to see a half a graph in the 2 pi. Okay, so I showed you here how I find what a full cycle would take. So you do the 2 pi over b, which would be 2 pi over 1/2, which is the same as saying 2 pi times, or divided by 1/2, which is the same as saying 2 pi times 2, which would be keep, change, flip. So 4 pi, so a full cycle will happen in 4 pi. So if we were to extend this graph and we went all the way to 4 pi, we would see a full cosine curve. Okay, so we're going to do the other intervals. And this one actually is a little more logical. If you take 4 pi and you divide it into fourths, it's going to be pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and then 4 pi. But I'll show you mathematically what we would do. So we take the 4 pi, and we're going to divide it by 4, which is like multiplying by 1/4, which would give me pi. So my first cycle is pi. Okay, I'm then going to get my next cycle, I'm going to use the pi, and I'm going to multiply it by 2, because every cycle is now going to go up by pi. So that's going to give me 2 pi. Okay, then my next cycle is going to go up by pi, but I'm in the third cycle, so that would be pi times 3, which is 3 pi. And my fourth cycle would be pi times 4, which is 4 pi, which we already knew that was going to happen. That's why we put that in there. So we got 2 pi and 3 pi. Okay, so that's going to be where all my stops would be. Now, in this case, I'm not going to show all the stops because it doesn't go out to 4 pi. So all my stops, so I'm going to have a stop at 2 pi, and then I'm going to have a stop somewhere on here for 2 pi. I'm sorry, we're going to have a stop somewhere on here for 2 pi, and I'm going to stop here somewhere for pi. I'm going to start on the y-axis, and since it's cosine, I want to start at the a term, and the a term is 2 in this case. So that's where I'm going to start, but that's also going to be the up and down part. Okay, so I'm going to start here. So for cosine, I always start at the a, and then if I added something at the end, I would adjust with that, but I don't have anything at the end, so I'm not. The cosine, I start at the a, and my first stop is going to be at pi, okay? And I want to go down 2, so I'm going to put a dot right where that was in this case. So I'm going down 2. My next stop is going to be at 2 pi, okay? And that tells me I'm going to go, for cosine, I'm going to go down again, and I'm going to go down 2 units. So I'm going to be here for that. All right, now that's all I can show on this graph is that. So this, I know it's going to go down, so I'm going to draw my line as a curve. It's not a line, and technically it's going to start swooping back up. All right, but it's going to take all the way out to 4 pi to get that. All right, so these are my intervals. Okay, you don't have, these happen to be written on the graph, but you don't have to write them as long as they're on the side. And that is how I would graph a cosine function with an a and a b term. Thank you.